In this video, I will explain how to find all the solutions to the equation cosine of 2 theta equals 1/2, and we're going to do that within the interval from 0 to 2 pi. Now, the cosine has an output of 1/2 twice, and that is at pi over 3 and also at 5 pi over 3. Okay, now the angle we're talking about is whatever's in this parentheses, so it would be 2 theta equals pi over 3 and 2 theta equals 5 pi over 3. Next step, solve for theta. So I'm going to divide by 2, and that's the same thing as multiplying by 1/2, so I get theta equals pi over 6. Same thing over here, and dividing by 2, I get theta equals 5 pi over 6. Now that's the first time that we have an output of 1/2 when we put up theta, these values of theta, into our equation here. But I need all of the times that I get an output of 1/2 within this interval. So next step is to think about our period. Okay, right down here I'm going to think about that. So period, since we're dealing with cosine, usually the period of cosine is 2 pi, but we've got a coefficient in front of our theta, so I divide by that coefficient and I get a period of pi. Okay, so to find all of the solutions, what we're going to do is think about adding multiples of our period. Okay, so the general formula would be theta equals pi over 6 plus multiples of the period. K is just some integer. Oops, that's plus, okay? And here the general formula would be 5 pi over 6 plus multiples of the period. Okay, we found the first time, so that's when k would equal 0. This would be k equals 0. And now you can just run through and plug in 1, 2, 3, etc. for our k and find all of the periods. You'll notice if you do that, you're going to start repeating angles, and you don't need repeats. We just need to run up until we're, within that 0 to 2 pi, and then stop. The way I like to do it is just to add multiples. So if I started with pi over 6, to get to the next one, I'm just going to add a period. So the next one, this would be at k equals 0. To get k equals 1, just add a period, okay? So we've got pi over 6 plus pi. I'm going to write that in terms of sixths, because that's what we're dealing with. So that would be 7 pi over 6 is the next one. And then at k equals 2, to find that one, we just add another period. From what we just found, add another period, okay? Pi, but since we're dealing with 6, I'll write that as 6 pi over 6. And you'll notice this one's just going to be too big, because we would get 13 pi over 6, which is not within our interval. We have to stop at 2 pi, which would be 12 pi over 6. So that's too big. Okay, and now same thing here. We would get our next one would be, take the first time that happened at 5 pi over 6, and we're going to add a period. So the next one would be at 5 pi over 6 plus 6 pi over 6, which is 11 pi over 6. And I'll scoot that up just a little bit. So here again, if I tried to add another period, this is, we would just get too big, because we would add another 6 pi over 6 and we would get 17 pi over 6, too big, okay? So our solution set would be all the thetas going from pi over 6, and then we have 5 pi over 6, 7 pi over 6, and finally 11 pi over 6, and that's it. We got them all within our interval. Done and done.